Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Management Apprenticeships Transforming the Future of Your Business digital event. I'm delighted that you could join us this afternoon. We are going to be joined by three people who are going to share their expertise and insights with us all in this area. I'd like to introduce you to John Crowson, Talent Development Partner at NG Bailey. Hi, John. Nice to have you with us. Also joining us from NG Bailey is Christina Spakis, who is Project Manager for Mobilisation. Welcome, Christina. And Robert Belcher, Operations Business Partner at Babington. Hi, Rob. Really nice to have you all with us. For those listening, if you have any questions during the session for anybody, please use the live chat box on the right of your screen, and we'll obviously answer as many as we can. And today's session is being recorded and it will be shared to everybody who booked to attend. It will also be available on the CMI website and the CMI YouTube channel. So before we go into our panel for today, if you could each do a short introduction. So John, let's start with you, please.
Hi, Ruth. Yeah, so I work at NG Bailey. I'm part of the Learning and Development team. And I've been here for coming up 4.5 years now. And my main responsibilities are I look after some overlapping things, actually. Firstly, I look after the talent development program, which is called My Journey, and also our leadership and management qualifications, which of course is where the CMI and the apprenticeship standards come in. And I also look after a lot of our succession planning activities at a senior level, which, again, this stuff flows into naturally.
Great, thank you. Thanks for taking time out of your very busy schedule, by the sounds of it, to join us today. And Christina, let's go to you next for a quick introduction, please.
Hi, yeah, so I'm a mobilisation project manager for NG Bailey in the services division. So my role is when we have new contracts that we have successfully tendered for, I manage the transition along with a very dedicated team to ensure that there's a smooth transition of services from the incumbent provider to our business. And yeah, I've been on the CMI at level 5, and I'm sort of in the last 6 months now. So been learning a lot and looking forward to what I can learn in the future.
Great, thank you, Christina. We'll hear more about your experiences as an apprentice later. And Rob, over to you, please, for a quick intro.
Thanks. I'm Rob Belcher from Babington. I'm the business operations partner in the key accounts team. So I work with the large accounts like NG Bailey. I've been working with John for about over 2 years now. Very looking at the operational side and the planning and the successful delivery of the programs for everybody on board, really.
Great, thank you, everybody, and really great to have you here. So let's get started. And John, I'm going to start with you, please. If you could tell us a bit more about how you came to be involved with the apprenticeship programme at NG Bailey.
Okay, well, yeah, as I mentioned, I joined NG Bailey in 2016, so 4.5 years ago. And for those of you that have had your eye on the apprenticeship levy, you'll know that was around the time that everything was really hotting up with it. I'd actually come from a postgraduate and exec education background, so apprenticeships were completely new territory to me. But coming in to look after the talent programme and to look after the leadership management qualifications, one of the things that was going on then was a conversation around, well, can we do what we're already doing? Can we deliver developments of the quality that we're already delivering, or even enhance that through the apprenticeship levy, so we can make use of our levy contributions, and so that we can keep on doing, real good quality work for our people from a management and leadership development perspective. Coming from the background I'd come from, being an apprenticeship newbie, there were, I guess I had some of the misconceptions that a lot of people have about apprenticeships, particularly when moving from such as craft and technical apprenticeships, which is what our business is actually really well known for. And I think actually that stood me in good stead. So yeah, for me, it was coming into the business and here's this opportunity. Is it an opportunity? Is it a challenge? These apprenticeships are coming. What can we do? How can we make the most of them to support our people and help our business improve?
Thank you. And so you mentioned management and leadership apprenticeships specifically. Why did you consider then those to be a priority for the organisation?
Well, they were a priority alongside other things we do. So we recruited our first apprentice in 1934, and we've recruited apprentices every single year since. You know, walls, nothing seems to stop us. We recruit apprentices, and our apprenticeship programme from a craft and technical perspective. So electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, quantity surveyors, building service engineers, all this kind of stuff. That's been the lifeblood of our business, and it will continue to be so. We normally have about 200 of those guys in the business at any one point in time. But when the levy was on its way, we'd been through a process of looking at jobs that we'd been struggling to fill, roles that we struggled to fill, looking ahead at capabilities we knew we'd need in the business that we felt could be addressed through apprenticeships. But also, as I mentioned, looking at the kind of development that's really important to us as a business. And for us, one of the things we say is we're a really good technical business. We're known as a great technical business with some really talented people. But we want to be known as a people business that just happens to deliver really outstanding technical projects. And the only way we're going to do that is if we keep on raising the bar for how we manage our people, manage our projects, how we look after our people and really, really lead them. So the obvious answer, if you put those bits together, is let's look at these apprenticeships and see, what can we do? And the levy did give us an opportunity to really have our choice of providers. So it's absolutely essential alongside the rest of the apprenticeships, because what an apprenticeship gives you, we've come to learn, is real confidence in the level and the quality of the skill and the knowledge that you add into the business. Definitely does that from a craft and technical perspective, and we didn't see any reason why it wouldn't be the same for leadership and management as well.
Great, thank you. And Christina, you've joined us today as our real life case study, which is lovely, and much more than that, obviously. And it's really great to have you here and hear your experiences directly. So, John, perhaps you could sort of talk through Christina's apprenticeship. So she's doing the level 5, as she mentioned. How was it set up? Were there any sort of specific challenges? Is this one you've been running for a few years? That kind of thing. That'd be great to know.
Yeah, we set up the level 5 departmental stroke operations manager apprenticeship in 2017. Rob sold us a year or two short there, Rob, in talking about 2 years. We set that up alongside a level 3 program. The starting point, I suppose, was a lot of conversations with the business, just making sure that everyone was clear that if we're going to go down this road, we're going to use these apprenticeships, but we're not just spending levy, we're spending that levy wisely. So making sure we had identified the priority areas. Having gone through that process, then it was a question of making sure that people within the business really understood, what these kind of programs would take out of them. We worked very closely with Babington actually to develop a whole communications process around this, but also to make sure that we're going to deliver this apprenticeship standard, but there's an opportunity to fine-tune the program. So we actually have 2 versions. We have an open program that anyone who's stepping into a role of this level can apply to join if they are in need of the skills, the knowledge to do the job. The version that Christina's on is part of what we call My Journey, our talent program, which is for people who we think can go further, faster. And that's got some additional components built in. So as well as having an off-the-shelf version, we have a version that's been fine-tuned for our business, we're both fine-tuned for our business and for our people. But the version Christina's on has some additional bells and whistles built in, such as an accredited coaching program. There's all kinds of things, additional workshops. And we feel that that's a real nice stretch for people of that level. So there's the conversations with the business, making sure that what we're doing is fit for purpose. There's the design of the program. And one of the big things from a setup perspective is what I'd call the pre-enrollment process. These programs aren't for everyone. They are very, very challenging. And, we were going from a model where people turned up at our head office, which we're very fortunate. It's a stately home in the middle of the Yorkshire Dales. They turn up and do 2 or 3 days on a workshop and then go and complete some assignments. It's not forcing people to stitch together their job and their program in the same way the apprenticeship structure does, through things such as 20% off the job. I'm sure there'll be some questions about that. So the pre-enrollment process is absolutely huge, making sure that, for example, Christina and her manager are able to look at the reality of the program, look at the opportunities, but also look at the challenges and answer two questions. And the first is this really the right program for me? And secondly, even if it is now the right time? We try and make it easy for people almost to say, well, not now, because when it works, when people have the latitude, the space to complete the program, it really, really works. But if that space isn't quite there, if people haven't understood the requirements, it's really, really challenging. And, we want to avoid those situations wherever we can.
And that's really interesting. And I think that pre-enrollment piece is clearly a very important step. And also interesting to know that you've adapted the same standard, but for different stakeholders within the organisation as well, that can be done. And it's obviously making it fit for purpose around the individuals and their job roles. So Christina, from your experience as the apprentice, what sort of reflections do you have? You said you're coming to the end, which is great. How would you reflect on your experience?
Yeah, very positive as a whole. And I think just to expand on John's point in terms of the pre-enrollment process, as somebody that went through it, it was really important to gain that understanding about the level of commitment that you would need to put in, and that you do need the support from your line manager and the business, and to really actually sit back and think, is this right for me? Is this the right time? Can I dedicate, the time that is needed? And actually, it's the first step on the journey to on the CMI journey, which a lot of it is to do with reflecting and considering about, well, this is something I've learned, or this is a situation that I've been in, and how did I react to it, and how could I improve? So in general, the thing that it does give you is that chance to reflect, but having that first step is so important because it shows you just what journey you're going to go on.
And obviously, because you're on the level 5, you'll be eligible for chartered manager status, which is absolutely all about the impact that you are making and the reflection, your own sort of reflection on that journey. So that's really interesting. So Rob, if I can come to you, John mentioned obviously that you've been working very closely and that you were involved very closely in that setup initially in the design. What's your sort of experience and reflections on what Christina and John have said?
Yeah, no, it's been really positive, because being able to sit down and design the workshops in relation to the whole standard, what does it look and feel like, what are they trying to get out of it, and what does the end goal look like as well, and being able to have that sort of flexibility around the workshops and interactions to really bring it to life has been really beneficial for us as well going through the programme, and it's been, we think, very helpful for everybody on the programme to be able to see a very NG Bailey version of the programme. So it lives and breathes their organisation. And I think that's, from working with other organisations, that's really good to see, that is, from an individual going on the programme.
Yeah, that's interesting. And then sort of more widely, Rob, again, from your point of view as a provider working with many clients, how can providers help employers access apprenticeships more widely? What sort of role do you play in helping employers access and understand the apprenticeships?
Yeah, I mean, it's very much from a initial conversation, which is where we started off with John, around what are their aims and objectives, what do they want to try and get out of the programmes and the development. But it's also putting, we can suggest ideas and having a different view on things as well, from our experience, particularly the last 4 or 5 years with the levy, of there's not one model that fits everybody. So it's having that experience to look and say, have we thought of this? And I mean, that's one thing that we've been doing throughout this programme, is actually reviewing it, going through and looking at what improvements we can make as well from different experiences. So it is that sort of broader conversation to start off with the team at Babington to help, really.
And it sounds like there's clearly a very close relationship with yourselves as the employer and the provider. So for employers that are looking for a provider of apprenticeships that are just starting out, what would you suggest they consider? I'm sure you'll say they should all consider Babington as their provider, but what are the main things that they should consider when looking for a provider?
I'm a great believer. It's about fit as well and shared values, and trying to achieve the same thing from the provider that you're working with the organisation. Because if you are working to those shared values, the communication, setup, plan, rollout, and everything else works a lot better. I believe, anyhow.
Thank you. Great. John, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that when you were looking for providers. Was there anything else that you sort of considered as an employer?
Well, actually, the first thing I did was I started speaking to CMI. So I didn't mention that first, but yeah, right at the very beginning in 2016, when I was trying to get my head around this whole landscape, which, as I mentioned, was very new to me, very lucky that we've got some outstanding, what we call apprentice development partners in our business who helped me get my head around apprenticeships as we'd been doing them. And then I just picked up the phone and spoke to CMI and the person that became my relationship manager. He really helped me understand it. It was very clear from the off that he and CMI were really very much at the forefront of the whole leadership and management apprenticeship standards. He really got the territory. And when the time was right, he connected me with a handful of providers. I went out and sourced some more myself and went through a procurement process, just asking them the questions. And the things Rob's mentioned, partly why we chose Babington was because they got why a match of values is important. They got more than anyone else what we were really trying to do around self-awareness and around behaviours. You know, we don't want to just develop people in terms of technical knowledge, skills, etc. We want to develop the person behind the skills, the person behind the role. And Babington really understood that and addressed that for us in their responses. So I think you can do a lot worse than having a conversation with CMI. Just spread your net wide and talk to people and see what feels right in terms of the tangible things you need delivering. But in terms of that sense of, can we work together? Will we work together over the long haul?
Yeah, that's a good point. And we've obviously, as you say, been involved from the outset of the management leadership apprenticeships, and we certainly work with a number of fantastic providers, Babington obviously included, that we can support employers and help introduce. Okay, and John, you mentioned, and both of you actually have mentioned the levy. So is there any advice or guidance that you can give to employers who are looking to transfer levy funds to support SMEs in particular?
So one of the things we've been working on is actually around that. And some of the other key accounts who I work with have been speaking to their supply chain and their sort of associated companies who they have dealings with, and where there's a natural selection and fit in terms of provision that's offered. It's gone through a very, very similar process than what they did in terms of startup and conversations and everything else around, but being able to use their levy transfer amount that they can to help those smaller organisations with that. So it's very much the same process that they went through is what we've been doing elsewhere, and very successfully on that. So
great. And I know that the levy often creates some confusion and it's a complicated matter. So if people do have questions about it, please pop them in the live chat box, or about anything else that you're listening to today. So question really for all of you, I'll come to you in turn. So John, if it's all right, I'll start with you. What would you say has worked well, particularly well, with the management apprenticeships, and what are your hopes and aspirations for the future?
Okay, so what's worked well in terms of making them work? I guess there's what's worked well in terms of making them work, and what's worked well in terms of the outcomes. If I think of the first one, line manager involvement is the big one for me. Broad business understanding. The business has to understand what these things are, and especially if you're a business like ours, where a lot of our senior people have gone through apprenticeships in their past, and things such as 20% off the job learning, that will be taken care of. through day release or block release to college. Well, I've got these people that already got a job. How's that going to work? The understanding around that stuff, the understanding of why we're doing this, what that actually means, but actually the benefits of the off-the-job learning, because it's often positioned as a burden. It's the thing that makes the learning stick. It's the thing that stops you having a job over here and a course over there. It's essential. The 70-20-10 thing for you L&D people out there, it's the 70% for me. But the line manager involvement from the outset, and I'm not overstating this, the quality of the partnership between and I would call it a partnership, between the candidate and the apprentice and their manager is the biggest success factor. And Christina's, done really well there. She's got an outstanding manager. When it comes to the outcomes, I think there's three things that we've spotted over time. So we do gather quite a lot of data. The first thing is the tangible outcomes that you'd expect to see. So people are delegating better time management, resource planning, all the stuff that you see written in the standard. It's happening, and it's making a difference. It's helping with efficiencies, with project delivery, financial management, all the stuff you'd expect to see. I don't need to reel it off. But the really, really pleasing thing, and this is a big one, and it's quite profound for a lot of people, is the more personal aspects around self-awareness, around people's confidence growing, people feeling more willing to speak up, to make decisions, which again, de-risks the business. There are tangible benefits to these intangible things. But for me, that's absolutely huge because it's life-changing. And again, some of the things we've built into the program, like quite in-depth personality profiles, bits of coaching around that, that's really, really huge. So we're getting the stuff we expect, we're getting the stuff that's on the tin, and we're getting a lot more, I think, as well. And from a personal growth perspective, that's huge. The third thing, which is worth mentioning, and this is something to think about in terms of setting up the programs, is where people have a team, which of course most of them will, who go on these programs, making sure that they are willing and ready and have the skills to share what they're learning with their teams, because then your return is exponential. So it's not just that individual getting better at managing and leading, they're sharing stuff with the people around them as well. And it not only kind of creates a curiosity and a real interest in these apprenticeships, but everyone's performance lifts, and so the programs kind of touch the people that aren't even on them.
I think that's a really valuable piece of insight, actually, John, that probably people don't consider or think about when they're talking about apprenticeships, because the focus is so much on the apprentice themselves. And it's really nice to hear you put some positive spins on some of the things that we do know concern employers, like the 20% off the job training. And the role of the line manager, I agree, is absolutely fundamental to the success of the apprentice, and employers can't underestimate that. So what does the future hold, John, for management apprenticeships in NG Bailey?
First thing, we're going to keep doing them, but we're going to look at the data. We're going to look at the data over time. We launched quite big in 2017, and we didn't realise how much we needed to sort of lay the message on thick about the challenge of the programs. So we set some people up for success, and I guess some people we didn't. So we had to kind of take care of them, and a bit more kind of support as they went through the program. In some cases, step away from it and find something better suited. I guess COVID this last year has been a big one for. We'd finally got to a point where we thought, right, we've got the messaging right. People are making their way into these programs who are ready. So I don't look at it in terms of ability. I look at it in terms of readiness for them and for their part of the business. And then, the world got turned upside down, and some people have just been able to crack on and get it done. But in a lot of cases, the world is different for people than it was when they set out on these things, and their lives are different, their jobs are different. So we've had to, there's been a bit more attrition than we would have liked. But again, we're looking at that. There's no judgment in that. There's no expectation. It's just things are different. Let's do the right thing by you, because these things are never going to be. The apprenticeship will never be neutral on performance or well-being. It's going to either improve it and improve well-being, or if it becomes a burden, it's got a negative impact in both senses. So going forward, we're going to look at the data, keep looking at the data, who's progressing really well, who doesn't, what themes, what trends can we spot, and fine-tune so that these remain an absolute core part of our leadership and management development offering, but that there's perhaps that bit more choice, that bit more flexibility. There's always been flexibility, but a bit more choice. We can steer people in the right direction better. But we keep doing it, and and yeah, just to see where they fit in the post, if there's such a thing as post-COVID, in the post-COVID world, how this fits as a part of our, fingers crossed, part of our broader people development strategy. Yeah, it's going to remain. It's just a case of making sure that we're not setting anyone up for a harder gig than they need. It should be challenging, but it should be enjoyable.
Yeah, great. And good to hear, yes, that you've obviously got your people's interests completely at the centre of all of this, which is great, and that you're flexible and adaptable. So, Christina, from your experience, what are you hoping, when you finish your apprenticeship, what next for you?
Well, yes, I'm, hoping to pass, obviously. And really, it's the continuing to implement what I have learned, and that is also to continue learning. Part of the real skill that that the course has given, or the apprenticeship, I should say, has given me, is that ability to critique, not criticise, but critique my leadership and management style. What do I do well? What do I need to work on? And to sort of continue that learning and pushing and setting objectives and goals, and bringing other people along with you as well, and just to sort of take that forward, and hopefully it will help me progress within the business, which is ultimately what it's why the business is investing, and it's and that's why I'm investing my time as well.
Absolutely, that's great. And Rob, just finally with you, what sort of key lessons have you learned? What are your hopes and aspirations for management apprenticeships going forward?
Well, I think one of the key things we've seen, particularly since COVID started and everything else, is the move to the online delivery. Because we used to do a lot of face-to-face workshops at the head office and everything, at the main site around that. So I think it's that interaction. But also the sort of refining of the program as well, and the more tailoring of the aspects around. I know from the skills coaches' perspective, the thing that they've really valued is the whole of NG Bailey's support from the line management, everybody else, because they see that in terms of how they can then support the apprentices on the program better with that support package and time behind the scenes at NG Bailey. So I think it's taking that, continuing with that, and refining the delivery for the new model, whatever that looks like going forwards with the more technology. And I think, yeah, it's utilising those opportunities where we can as well. So.
And I'm going to move into some questions. Actually, we've had some questions through while we've been talking, and this question links very nicely to what you've just said, actually, Rob. So the question is, it sounds like apprenticeships require a lot of support from an employer. How would you advise an SME to deal with this, given they are likely to have limited capacity to provide learning development support? Now, Rob, you obviously work with a number of different partners and clients. Is that something that you can answer?
Yeah, and I would say really have a discussion with your provider who you're looking to work with around what does the scale and the scope of the program look like, because it is sort of a different undertaking, having maybe one or two managers undertaking a program a year as opposed to 40 or 50 managers undertaking a program of a year. So I'll speak to your provider and main contact within there, and they can talk through really the support that providers can help with as well. But also it is that line manager support, as John mentioned quite a few times, that's the key to enable the time and the scope for the person going through the program to be able to get the best out of it. So that's probably the biggest area of time to focus on within the SME community.
That's great, and obviously, I speak from CMI as the endpoint assessment organisation, but I know as well that working very closely with our providers, there are a lot of tools and sort of advice and hints and tips that we also can support with, and templates and things that we can help employers with in regards to some of that support. And then a linked question really, and John, if I can field this to you, please. And then maybe Christina as well, actually, from a practical point of view, how do you accommodate off the job training with day-to-day business demands? John, if you go first, and then Christina, please.
It's a popular question, that one, in our business. I think the first thing is really understanding what it means. It's quite unhelpfully named in some ways. So the way I describe it to people in our business is what we're committing to. If someone's going to go on this program, we're committing that person needs to spend 20% of their time on learning to do with this apprenticeship. However, that doesn't mean they're going to spend a day a week out of the office. You're not going to lose them for a day a week. They're not going to be sitting at a computer reading articles and things for a day a week. It's not about that. I said, if you imagine half of that time would be spent on perhaps your traditional, or not so traditional these days, learning activities, reading, watching videos, tutorials, listening to podcasts, reflecting on that. What does that mean for me? How can that show up in my role? Maybe planning around how you're going to put it into practice. So around half of that stuff, half of that time, I would say is, you need to be able to create that space for someone. And if you can't, then we shouldn't be thinking about this. Let's think of something else. If you can, then the other half of it, that's what you can extract from stuff they're doing anyway. So, for example, if you're looking at a person who spends, a couple of hours a week in a meeting and they play a bit part role, can they chair it? That'd be a new experience for them. What about all the time they're spending talking with their team when they could be trying out their coaching skills or mentoring skills, or conversations with their manager, again, where they are coached or mentored? Time spent planning for this negotiation, or how to influence such and such a person. There's a lot of stuff that they're doing in their day-to-day job anyway that, when thought about properly, can absolutely contribute to their growth and development as a manager, as a leader. And that's not fudging things. It's not ticking boxes. That's real life development. That's the stuff that really counts. So I would say, ask yourself the first question: can this thing I'm doing contribute to my growth, development as a manager, as a leader? If yes, great. That's your first hurdle. Second thing, does it link to my program? Well, it should do if it's about your growth as a manager and as a leader. And is it happening? Third question, is it happening in the working week? If you're answering yes to those questions, it's probably off the job learning. It's then just a case of, catching it all, logging it all. So there's loads and loads of stuff. And again, as Rob said with the last question, I'd say talk to your provider, because they'll have some really good ways of doing it. Talk to other people who've got these apprenticeships up and running. You'll always come away with a good idea.
That's really useful. And Christina, from a kind of on-the-job practical point of view, or off-the-job, but the practical point of view, what sorts of things have you done that fall into that definition as John's just described it?
Yeah, I think it's really key is that definition of the off-the-job learning, because one of the things that attracted me to the apprenticeship was the practical application, and not just I'm going to sit and read theories about management, write an essay, and then I'm going to go back to my job and forget that they exist. It pushes you, and part of that pushing is the fact that you've got to get the 20%, time allocated. So it really pushes you to look at what you're doing in a day and think, right, well, in that thing that I do every week, what can I do differently to implement something that I've learned, whether it's in a podcast or a YouTube video, or a book that you might be reading, or anything that you're learning sort of in a more traditional sense. So for me, it's very often, if a situation has come up, like that there's a bit of a problem and we need to solve the problem, and I know that I behave in one particular way, and actually I need to behave, I've identified I need to behave in a different way to try and get a different outcome. That right there is the practical application of this apprenticeship. And it's, you hope you get a better outcome. And you know what? Sometimes you don't. And you think, well, I won't try that again. But you reflect on it and you think, well, what worked well? What didn't? Or actually, that worked so well, I can't believe I've not been doing it like that before. And, that's a very sort of black and white way of looking at it, but it does give a real flavour of it's really about the practical application, because that is how you learn. I can tell you about the different leadership styles. I could probably tell you what sort of leader I am, but how am I putting that into my day-to-day life? And then the tricky thing after that is the reflecting, taking that time to step back and think what did go well and what didn't go well. But it's a muscle that you need to work, and it's tricky to sit there and think, oh, right, well, what do I want to say about this thing? And how do I feel about that? And how do I think other people reacted to it? But once you do it, you get into the habit, and it does become easier, and finding those opportunities become easier. It does seem really daunting, but as you go through, the opportunities just seem to open up, and it gives you, or it's certainly given me, the impetus to say yes a lot more. To things like this, which, live webinar I haven't done before, but it's given me that opportunity to do that.
That's really, really great to hear, and you're doing brilliantly, by the way. So one for the log. And I think, John, your point, and obviously this links to your role in this, Rob, is that provider relationship is so key. And if this is something, and we know this is something employers find daunting, because you're right, actually, it's not a very helpful name, is it, off the job? But obviously, Rob, as a provider, you can provide support, help people understand how to define and work through what that should look like.
Yeah, I mean, we have it as a regular point from where John started, where we set up the programme. What does that actually look like? Building it through to when I do the pre-advice and guidance to everybody before they sign up, and then regularly with the skills coaches on their monthly conversations as to how's that going, how's it logging down, what opportunities are coming out of it as well. So it is that ongoing throughout the whole programme to get the best out of it, really, and see it as an opportunity, like you've heard, to really bring it to life more than anything else.
Great, thank you. And Rob, another question for you, actually. It's specifically about the provider role. So the question is there anything that you would suggest that providers could focus on to really help and support apprentices?
I always think there's a couple of things that as providers we can really help with. One is as sort of staff who support all the apprentices through, but it's making sure the setup and the clarity around expectations of what's actually involved, so there aren't any surprises 3 months, 6 months, 9 months in a gateway or anything else like that. So I think that transparency and clarity at the start really allows for a smooth path for everybody to go through the programme. That's what I find anyhow. And then that ability to go, oh, okay, do we need to tighten up on a couple of things? Do we need to refocus on some areas? And be open to having those conversations to support as external factors change what we're doing, as happened like last year. So it's able to move with things as well. I think that clarity of the setup to me is one of the key things, so everybody's really clear.
And that's come through a lot today with this conversation about the expectation setting, the clarity at the very beginning with the pre-enrollment piece, John, that you mentioned. So I think that's really, really good advice for people. So another question, so this is an interesting one, and actually we do get this a lot. So we're obviously talking about management apprenticeships today, and they start at level 3 and they obviously go right through to level 7, so the sort of master's level. So John, if I can come to you maybe on this, and the question is, my apprentice does not have line management responsibilities as part of their normal role. How can this be resolved? Is that something, John, you could answer?
I can have a go, and Rob might tell me I'm getting it wrong. So at the start, our belief is that, we don't want to promote people into jobs that they haven't got skills for and then start training them then when we can avoid it. We like to prepare people, given that, we wouldn't employ an electrician and let him loose on a building site if he didn't have his badges, and if he, it's just silly. So why should it be any different with it's dangerous. Why would it be any different with management and leadership? So at the start, we were positioning the level 3 and level 5 programs as, particularly level 3, you're getting ready for a first line manager role, or you're in a first line manager role, then let's get you onto this program if we can give you access to the responsibilities. If it's close on your horizon, if it's not too far in the distant timescales. We used to do that more than we do now, because as things have changed, it's become a little bit more difficult for people. Some people have really struggled with certain aspects of the apprenticeship, if I'm honest, because they haven't had access to certain tasks, roles, responsibilities. So we've been trying to sharpen it up as we've gone along, again, in response to certain changes from an apprenticeship perspective. Where we're at now, and we had a conversation like this just the other day, we look at, are you responsible for a project team? So if you haven't got any, legitimate or kind of direct line reports, perhaps you're spending your time working on projects, pulling project teams together, where you're absolutely managing, you're absolutely leading. And what's more, it's even harder for you because no one has to do what you tell them. But things are changing and have been changing almost since the start. So it's been a bit of a battle to keep on top of that and make sure that the people on programme aren't being kind of caught out. So I'm going to need to defer to Rob for the latest thinking on this.
No. So it's a part of the initial advice and guidance that John was mentioning that we actually had last week with one of his members of staff was they need the opportunity to put the skills all into practice. So they do need to be able to line manage at least 2 members of staff to have the team aspect and everything else through that. And it's the involvement of the line manager is key around that decision as well, because as in the question, if they haven't quite got that yet, is the ways that their line management responsibilities can change so they do have that full autonomy, particularly around some of the trickier people aspects of that, to actually put that into practice, their skills throughout the apprenticeship. So it is that conversation before they start is key around that.
And again, that's setting it up properly and getting that in place. And presumably, Rob, that can happen with things like maybe managing a cross-functional project, or there is stakeholder management of some sort in that for people. There are opportunities there.
There is, but there is the. I think it's that conversation is really key, because Broadbrush is quite tricky on that sometimes. They do need that full one-to-one responsibility for those individuals to be able to put all of the skills that are in the standard into practice as well. So it is that conversation around suitability, which is what we always have before anybody, after they've been through John's part, before they start up the program, we have that conversation as well to make sure it is the right program and they've got the right job role to match it. So. Yeah,
great. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to wrap up now. Thank you so much, everybody, for your time. I'd like to wrap up with a very quick fire round where I'd like to share maybe 1 or 2 absolute tips. So taken from the sort of things that you've said today, the top tips for other employers who do want to get involved and consider management apprenticeships as part of their development strategy. So John, I'm going to come to you. 2 absolute top tips for employers, please.
First thing, know why you're doing it. Don't do it just because you want to spend your levy. Make sure it's actually pointing at something strategically important. And secondly, talk to people. Talk to the CMI, talk to providers, talk to organisations, leaders, HR, L&D people who are doing it. And you'll always get something valuable from every conversation. Just get talking. Brilliant. Thank you. Rob?
I think from an employer's perspective and providers, making sure there's time and the scope within the business to fully utilise the actual programs they're going on, and it can be applied so they can see that return that they're hoping for from the program.
Brilliant. And Christina, anything to add from your point of view?
I suppose for the individual, be really honest with yourself about why you want to do it and whether you can commit to it, and have a really honest conversation with your line manager. Having that relationship is so key, and really fundamental to your success.
That's brilliant. My goodness, we're out of time. That's been such a great discussion. I think we could have gone on for a lot longer. We had other questions that we'll respond to and send out after the event. So thank you so much to everybody for joining us. Thank you so much, John, Rob and Christina. Christina, best of luck in your last stages of your apprenticeship. We've got everything crossed for you. And for people that want to find out more about management apprenticeships, please do visit the CMI website. There should be a link in the chat box that you can click through to, and that will also give you information if you're interested in becoming a CMI partner. If you're already a member of CMI, you can log into Management Direct using the link in the chat box, where you can find lots of practical tools. And if you haven't yet subscribed and you want to access all those fabulous resources, then please do. And you can sign up to our free newsletter if you like to see what we've got to say, and you get loads of practical tips sent to your inbox. So thank you everybody once again for joining us. Have a really great rest of the day, and we'll see you soon.